So good morning. Good morning to all of you who came in person, but also good morning to those who are following the Science Business Annual Conference online. I'd just like to announce that if you wish to put something to the social media, please use not Twitter, but LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the social media have chosen targetedly for this event. So please, those who wish to send messages, pictures, whatever, do it on the LinkedIn pages. Thank you very much to choose the session, which is a very important session about how the EU will finance the scientific and the technological ambitions. First, I'd like to welcome our speakers, and I'd like to invite me here next. No, after the video. Oh, after the video. Yeah, sorry. First, I'd like to inform you that we have a video message from the Vice President of the European Parliament, Mr. MEP Negrescu, who was the budget reporter for this year for the entire European budget. So he has some video message for him. The video message was a bit longer, so we cut it for pieces, so it will be 3 small slots to show. This happens, I think, that we have to be very open about it. And then we will go to the second session to have a discussion. Before to go to the video, I'd like to say how the MFF scene will be done. So the MFF will be published in middle of July under the Danish presidency, and it will be done in 2 phases. The first phase between now, already is going on until April. They have to agree how much is the budget, the entire budget from the member states. When we have it, then the second phase starts, the distribution of budget among the different budget lines or the different priorities. Our speakers will focus on the second part, that what is to be financed. Yeah? But I think that it's important to know that it's a very big question, how big the MFF can be. And Mr. Serafin made a presentation in the budget committee last week, and he made it very clear. Scenario 1, we cannot collect more money than the 1% of the GDP. In that case, the European budget compared today will be negative a bit, because we have to start pay back the next generation EU-related loans, which count to 20 to 30 billion per year, on the budget of the 170 billion per year. Yeah? So it's quite significant. We cannot make it with the savings. The alternative that we find other finance to come in, convince the finance ministers and convince the head of states to keep the level of the finance of the European Union current projects. And then the different priorities, of course, will come with different needs. Science is one of them. So let's first look the video and listen carefully. I think that there are some very important messages for you, how you can help the MFF process in your working places. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the kind invitation to address you today through this short video message. I think it is really important and crucial to have this timely discussion about the future of research and innovation at European level, in a context where we are discussing about the new mandate and the new European agenda. Therefore, of course, it is important to raise awareness while in the same time reacting to the different proposals that the Commission is making. For instance, with regards to the competitiveness compass that comes up with very interesting ideas, but also which doesn't develop enough the importance of research and innovation, the importance of the scientific ecosystem, but also the need to use the potential offered by research programs like Horizon Europe, but also the opportunities that can be developed if we manage to put together the different solutions, innovations, and research studies that were financed by the EU through its different programs, because we have very interesting initiatives, very interesting outcomes that will also finance through Digital Europe program, for instance, or the cohesion programs. We need to, once more, underline the need to have clarity and not give opinions about research and innovation without consulting the ecosystem and the scientific world, without discussing with the private entrepreneurs in the field, while in the same time really analyzing the problems that we are facing at European level. And I have to tell you that the debate is quite a difficult one at European level. I'm the Vice President of the European Parliament that tries to actively promote the importance of research in this House for legislators. I'm actively investing in our research body here in the European Parliament to try to underline once more the need to study the different topics on which we are legiferating and regulating. In the same time, I was a European Parliament negotiator for this year's budget, and it was quite an intense and difficult discussion, the one that we have had last year with the Council, but also with the Commission. After several days of negotiations, actually, we finished the discussions at 4 o'clock in the morning. After more than 17 hours of negotiations, we managed to convince the Council to allocate more money for research. For instance, for the cluster research and innovation, the Council wanted to cut the allocation by €500 million, and we managed to obtain the money that was cut, and in total for that cluster we have €13.5 billion. They also wanted to cut by €500 million the funds for Horizon Europe. And everyone speaks at European level about innovation and we need to do more for our competitiveness. But again, the Council came with this proposal to cut the financial allocation for this important program. Again, we managed to convince the Council and we got €12.7 billion for Horizon Europe program for this year. The same thing happened also on defense and research related to defense. And we managed there to get more than €400 million. But again, it was not easy, despite the fact that member states are claiming to support research and innovation in defense. We also managed to obtain several million euros for European Innovation Council or the Marie Curie actions. And this shows that actually, beyond the nice rhetoric, beyond nice speeches and declarations, we have difficulties in matching our declarations with numbers because we need money. Therefore, of course, we can easily look at the Draghi's report that calls upon member states to increase the funding for research and innovation. He speaks about the target that we all share to invest 3% of our GDPs in research and innovation. But we are far behind that respective objective. We have many member states that do not manage to reach that clear target, do not understand why it is important, but also do not explain to people, to our citizens, why we need to invest more in research and development. That money that we are investing today will bring added value on the long term. More and more we speak about competitiveness. And indeed, we all know that if we speak about competitiveness, we have to speak about research, innovation, and development. But it's not as easy as it looked. The European Commission just recently launched the Competitiveness Compass, which contains some interesting objectives and some also ideas that I consider to be effective. Nevertheless, we should emphasize more the importance of research and innovation. We need specific structures, we need predictability for research, we need also to make sure that we are defending the research program. It doesn't matter the name. What is important is to, again, continue the effective and efficient initiatives, continue to finance the research programs that are underway, but also in the same time make sure that we are not merging everything together and forget about science, innovation, development, the scientific ecosystem, universities, research institutes, and so forth. It's very clear that there is no perfect solution, but there are some things that we can do. For instance, reduce the administrative burden. For instance, making sure that venture capital reaches innovation, making sure that the results of the different studies financed by the EU are being assessed, correlated. Also putting teams together, very important people-to-people relations, and really building a European ecosystem of research. Despite our efforts, we still do not have it. People do not meet, do not work together. Every research institute tries to defend its own researches, its own funding, and we need to do more in order to elaborate on that, but also correlate with the private sector. We need a more flexible decision-making process, a better governance at European level, and making sure that we are not transforming scientific governance in bureaucracy. We have to be more careful in the way we nominate people, make sure that they are working for everyone, and again, there are no conflicts of interest, and we have full transparency. We also need to make sure that we introduce a key principle: equal work, equal pay, also in terms of research. We have very good research being done, for instance, in Central and Eastern Europe, and they do not receive the same funding. In the same time, we have smaller universities, smaller research institutions, smaller research teams, new research teams that have difficulties in finding the funding that they need. Citizens expect from us disruptive changes that will bring added value, but disruptive doesn't mean chaos. That is why we need you. We need you to get involved in the debate, and I can assure you that at the European Parliament level, you have many, many supporters. I come from the academia. I know very well how difficult your job is. I know the challenges. I know how hard it is to spend your nights in your research lab or writing your paper or doing your studies. I know how difficult it is to find the right idea, the right expression, building the team, managing the administrative burden. I know the pressure. I know how complicated it is to find the funding for your ideas. Maybe some politicians do not understand that. And we need to explain to them everything related to your job. Take it from scratch, because everyone speaks about research and innovation without actually trying to learn. So therefore, I also call upon you to teach me.
So, very clear, the parliament, the entire parliament is in favor of the science and research, and they already, for this year, avoided some very serious cuts for the Horizon program. So now I'd like to invite the three distinguished speakers, starting with Felicitas Riedl, who is the Director for Innovation in the EIB, Raphaël Bello, the Director for Finance and HR in CERN, and Daniel Gros, who is from the Bocconi University, and they made a very interesting study with the Institute for European Policies about the mid-tech trap, which I'm sure that you will mention it, but I suggest to everyone to read this report. I think it's a very eye-opener in many ways, adding to this report. So as we agreed, I'd like to ask three of you, starting maybe with Felicitas, to introduce a bit yourself and the company and what you would like to share with the community here.
Yes, first of all, also a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Felicitas Riedl, and I'm heading the Innovation and Competitiveness Department within the European Investment Bank. I think most of you know the EIB is the EU bank, so we are owned by all 27 member states. And as we are AAA rated, it is our intention to pass on the capital that we raise preferentially due to our very good rating to pass on for projects that fulfill the EU objectives. Innovation is, of course, very crucial in this aspect, and just to give you an order of magnitude, while EIB in total signed 89 billion last year in 2024, about 20 billion, just to be clear with the figures, were going towards projects in the innovation space, and out of those, 8 billion were directly related to equity and quasi-equity risks. Having said this, I want to reiterate that for us, innovation and investments in research, development, and innovation are absolutely crucial, and we consider the entire ecosystem or the entire value chain, and that contains both investments through the public but also through the private sector. And I think we can go more in detail later.
Thank you, Felicitas. So, Raphaël Bello.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Yes, I'm Raphaël Bello, so director at CERN. CERN is, for those who don't know it, it's the European Organization for Nuclear Research. No, I just try to pick up what the Vice President mentioned at the end. Please teach us. So I would like maybe to not teach him, but teach all of you on why CERN is, in my opinion, a quite outstanding European success. First of all, because it's in Europe, and it's a global leader in this field, which is not so many fields in which Europe has the world leadership, including the US. So that's quite great. But more interestingly, I would say it's also because it's a mix between fundamental research and applied research and related technologies. When I listen to the debate splitting the fundamental research versus applied, I would say that at CERN, at least, we see that there is a full continuity between these different settings. Fundamental research, because we are simply looking for the origin of the universe. So this is very theoretical, but very applied as well, because to do this, we design, build, operate facilities which are quite huge. The flagship project is the Large Hadron Collider, which is a ring of 27 kilometers underground, with a lot of very high-tech machine equipment within. So for doing this, you need a lot of knowledge, expertise, R&D, techniques, and so this is exactly what CERN does for the last 70 years. So it's really a mix of technologies, cryogenics, vacuum, superconducting magnets, among others. And this is a success also not only because we are discovering things like the Higgs boson in 2011, but also because we have, I would say almost by chance, by serendipity, we have spillover effect of what we are doing for science. And this is one thing that I would like to underline, which is probably not as known as the other one. We know that CERN has invented the World Wide Web. Okay, it was quite a long time ago now, but still we are working also with the medical industry to provide our technologies developed for our accelerators to treat cancer, to improve imaging. This is a very concrete spillover effect that we do with partners in hospital, in industries. We are also working, for example, with Airbus. We have a collaboration agreement with Airbus to provide our technologies concerning superconducting magnet to improve the electrical equipment in the future airplane, which will be hydrogen powered. So this is something that Airbus does not master, and they are keen on working with us because we have, of course, a very high expertise in that matter. So the objective in that matter would be to have a much more efficient and less heavy equipment within the plane. This is for the future, but you can see that, once again, by serendipity, we can work and have positive effect on society. So maybe I would stop there. There was also, we were talking this morning at the first session about training and mobility, and I think that CERN is also symbolizing a huge center of training, because at any given time in the year, we are training 4,500 young people, being student, doctoral student, postdoc. At any moment in time, 4,500 people. What do those people, of course they work and they are trained at CERN, but at the end, they are going back to industry because we cannot welcome them all, we cannot hire them all because we have no budget enough. We'll come back later on that matter. And they go to industry and they are very well recognized and, I would say, looked after when they are going to the industry. So this is the kind of spillover effect as well that we are happy to deliver to society for the money that we get from our member states. I will stop there for the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel.
Thanks a lot for having me here. I'm Danny Gros. I'm now director of the Institute for European Policymaking at the University of Bocconi. Some of you might know me as a long-time Brussels insider. Since 40 years ago already, I have been around looking at in a think tank, again at the European problems of the day, some of which never seem to change. I remember already in the 1980s there was this complaint that Europeans were good at science, but then were not good at translating it into products. At the time the products were video cassette recorders and other similar things made in Japan. Plus ça change. But now, coming to our situation today in Europe, I totally agree that CERN is an outstanding success. And I would also, I'm an economist, but I fully subscribe to the idea that Europe being present in science is a value in itself, right? But the European economy is not doing too great these days, and the key reason, which probably all know, and the Draghi report reiterates, is that we are weak in the high-tech areas. And that is why we concentrated our study that you gracefully mentioned on this question. And there are two ways to approach it. One was, what is the EU doing? And here, if we come to the question, how do we translate science and research into companies? We have what's called the European Innovation Council, which was created with Horizon Europe but had some precursor, which in our view is a very valuable addition to the Horizon programs. But we also outline ways in which could be much improved. So more value for the same money should be possible. But this also has to translate then into industry. And when we looked at the research and development expenditure of European industry, we find that that is concentrated to a very large extent in what we call middle technology sectors, like automotive and machinery. I mean, the problems of the European automotive sector are known. The European automotive sector does a very large share of the global research in the sector. And so it should be strong, but right, it's mainly small-scale innovations that add to existing production processes, and then the breakthrough innovations apparently happen elsewhere. But what is more worrying is that if we look at the high-tech sector, like software and ICT, there the research and development is almost all done by American companies. The ratio between what is done by European companies and in the US is around 10-1. And that has been the case not just recently, but over a number of years. So the accumulated stock of knowledge of these American companies are a mountain to climb, right? Which I think is impossible at present. But what could be done, and I think that should be part of the discussion and of the Horizon program, is to create mechanisms which make or render possible more investment in future new tech areas. I don't know what they will be, right? But that I don't think we, the Commission or the EU, should choose, but that should come up from the bottom. And I think that should be the key theme also for the competitive discussion, how to make EU industry more active in future areas of research instead of always investing in the same old stuff.
Thank you very much. Now, my role as a moderator to translate it all to the budgetary terms. Yeah? So regarding the EIB, I'd like to say that the 20 billion EIB budget is a kind of complementing the Horizon Europe. It's available for the researchers. So I'd like to ask the audience, how much of you have a business with the EIB? Please raise the hand. Yeah? You see, I think that this is something exists, valued 20 billion euro, still something to talk, so use the time with Felicitas and look the EIB webpage how it can be better done. But maybe you can share with us some stories, you know, to generate the appetite to go to you.
Absolutely. If you just allow me to make a few comments to what was said previously, just to set the context. So I fully agree with your assessment where Europe is lagging behind and what needs to be done. But what I want to also highlight again, if you look at the European population in total in terms of number of students with tertiary education, we are quite similar to the US. But then it already starts to diverge, where in terms of the innovation being translated into patents, those patents to make it into companies, even though the number of a startup company is still not so far off, but then somehow European companies do not grow to the same extent. And many of them are kept small, whereas in the US, it seems to be easier to really have those growth stories. The reason I'm saying is that we need to tackle this at several areas. So I think, first of all, I fully agree, we need to continuously invest in R&D. We have to be mindful that currently, globally, the world, Europe, is faced with so many challenges, being in the energy sector, being in, to not give up on AI. But we also need to recognize that we don't know yet what the solutions to all these problems are. So we really need to be quite open and therefore to invest in the starting point. And that's what EIB is doing. So we do support universities to set up, for instance, the correct infrastructure to be agile, to address of the demands of providing education of today. But we also do support a public R&D, which I think is also extremely important to settle the starting point. With our daughter, the European Investment Fund, which is the largest venture capital provider, we really foster the ecosystem where we do go from technology transfer, so precisely the step that was mentioned before, to help exploit the innovation that comes out from universities and research organizations, but also to provide with co-investment with business angel, for example, the initial seed funding or high-risk capital, to then, from EIB point of view, venture debt. I think this is something that is probably not so well known, but EIB has become the largest venture debt provider, where we directly support SMEs in their growth story. But we don't stop here. We also provide funding to large corporates in order to grow and to also build capacity within Europe. And I think all of this is extremely important and very relevant. And we need to work together to see where do we have the largest gaps. So where are the funding needs the most, and where can we, with financial instruments, with blending opportunities, to really address risk. To give you a small indication, to come back to your question on examples, I think some of you, we have just had the Olympics, and you may have seen the person carrying, I think, the torch, who was paralyzed, who's the help of Wondercraft, the exoskeleton. This is one of the companies that benefited from our venture debt financing. We also do support the large 5G infrastructure across Europe. I think part of the reason why in AI, for example, we are so far behind is that the digital infrastructure part is not yet where it should be, and that's a prerequisite for us to be innovative. I think EIB has financed most of the largest wind offshore farms, so I think we were one of the first risk investor when the technology wasn't yet fully commercial, or it wasn't a proven technology. So our engineers also looked at it and took the decision that we believe that this could be a breakthrough technology, and thus we took the risk to go into support it with debt. I think it's also something important to bear in mind. We are a bank and we require a return on our investment. If you allow me one last comment to the fact we have lost the battle in terms of AI. I think you pointed out the 10-to-1 ratio, which I find quite shocking. But being an optimist, how I am, I would also see the DeepSeek example is, I think, also a positive signal to Europe that maybe the fight isn't lost yet. Maybe it's not the tens of billions investment that are needed to actually come up with highly innovative solutions. So therefore, I just want to close here to say, Europe has the capacity to innovate. Let's focus on where we are stronger and work together to come up with the right financial instruments that make this happen going forward.
Daniel, you wish to react, but yeah, just
really one line. I was asking myself, would what DeepSeek has done have been legal and possible in Europe?
I would argue, as a moderator, that do we know if DeepSeek is secure and safe enough to use on the longer term? Yeah. So, but you are absolutely right. Both. If I'm thinking about the car industry 100 years ago, just because Ford was the champion doesn't mean that we all drive Ford cars nowadays. Yeah. So nothing is set in stone in the longer period of time. Yeah. So just and maybe on the car, I turn to you, Daniel. 15 years ago, I raised the issue at that time in the European Parliament that in the 20 years time span, do we drive digitalized car or do we drive computer? Yeah? And it seems to be very much we drive a computer, because if I'm looking at the price of the car, the digital part is more expensive than the traditional car part. Yeah? So I think Europe lost the battle on the cars 20 years ago when they didn't think seriously about that, that it is a computer. But tell us a bit more about, which is related to the budget. You had a point that the 10% investment rate across Europe is okay, but if we do it equally to everyone, it doesn't help. So something about this specialization, where the money should go.
Yeah, I mean, that's, first of all, the question of this 3% of GDP target, which I find really misguided, because if most of our enterprises are in the middle tech sector. Middle tech sectors are characterized by a ratio of, let's say, R&D expenditure to revenues of 5%, all over the world, right? If you have our industry structured this way, do we want our car industry to invest even more in how to produce cars, right? Doesn't make sense. The US has a much higher ratio. Why? Because its firms invest in high tech. Germany, for example, has a ratio of 3% of GDP, has reached it. Why? Because that's all the big car producers. And we see where that leads you. So I think, first of all, we should get away from these numerical quantitative targets. We should look at the composition and the quality. And that, I think, is also valid for the budget. After all, R&D expenditure is an input. Right? CERN is something different, right? We want to have world-class research in certain areas. But after all, I mean, if you invest in R&D, especially private companies, you want to see an output. And that is also key for the EU budget. So I think we should look very carefully what value for money we got from our EU funding. And I'm all for increasing the funding for research and development, right? If it were for me, I would double it, no problem. But I think we should also ask ourselves, are there ways in which we can get more out of the present funds allocated? And there, I mentioned earlier the European Innovation Council, which could be improved. There's also the design of the competitiveness part of Horizon, a famous Pillar 2, where most of the money is. And the evidence we are collecting is that it's very difficult to find a permanent positive impact of the funding received by most enterprises. So again, it's very important to look at the quality, at the structure, not only at the overall numbers.
Thank you very much. Raphaël, I'm turning to you, but first you reply, wish to react.
Yes, just maybe to make the liaison. I fully agree with the value for money, be it, by the way, EU money or public money in member states as well. I mean, it's a real question which politicians have to address, and it's not easy to answer because you have tradition, history, past legacy, and you spend more or less plus or minus compared with what you did in the past, without necessarily easily questioning the relevance and the value for money you get from. And this is, and so call it framework, FP10, competitive compass, whatsoever. The question is what for? And with what kind of monitoring and KPI for this. And it's not easy, I must say, because internally I have already some problems to put it in my own organizations. But anyway, so just maybe to follow up on the CERN. Okay, CERN, I mentioned before, is enjoying a good partnership with European Commission, but I would say first and foremost with other European members, universities, institutes, research institutes, and so on, and not that much with European Commission yet. We are a hub or a platform for all European partners, and we are receiving money, but actually, if I tell you the number, it's less than 10 million per year out of budget of 1.3 billion. So you can imagine the size of the... But we are not doing this for money, to be honest, because we do believe that we have a role to play in gathering people together, welcoming young people, as I mentioned, training them, sending them back, assuring mobility. But we are also considering the future, because for the time being, we have a project for the next generation, which is called the Future Circular Collider. Might be another flagship program, but it is something we're working on, feasibility study at this stage, and the decision will be taken later. And we have, of course, a funding problem, a funding issue. We are receiving money from our member states, so 1.2 billion per year. But for the time being, it's not sufficient to fund this project in the future. So we are looking for any alternative, complementary alternative for this, because we are missing, I would say, 2 to 3 or 4 billion actually, which is not anything but across at least 12 years. And we are approaching our American partners, and they are responding positively, but to be negotiated. They are considering some amount. But we do believe that there is still some room for European Commission in the next MFF to jump in to complement what member states are providing. Why? Because, as I said, we are delivering for European strategic objectives. This is very important. But also because we have a Chinese competition, a pure Chinese competition. I mentioned it because China is developing exactly the same kind of project in China. The decision will be taken this year in the framework of the 5-year plan. So depending on if they go ahead or not, we might face a very huge, fierce competition to keep the leadership and to keep attractiveness of all this 17,000 people community that work at and with CERN. So this is, for me, very important. And I would say that we have also to be careful about the European character. I just taken one example. We are very happy because last year we received 50 million relatively quickly from the Eric Schmidt Foundation for working, because he knows exactly what we're doing with the next generation trigger in software. Very sophisticated software mechanism to put order in the 40 million pictures per second that we take in each detector, and we keep only 1,000 to give you a sense of. So we have very elaborated software. And he's fully aware of the importance of this very specific equipment. And he put immediately 50 million to send people to work with us on that. Of course, we have some barriers to avoid problem of property, but this is illustration that we could work and we should work, but mainly with, in my opinion, with European partners and not only with US partners. So I don't say that money is not welcome from US including, because this is a huge and very historical partner, which is welcome, of course, but it gives you a sense of what we can do, what we can deliver in terms of technologies. And honestly, as a European, I would prefer that it stays with European partners, be it industry, research, or whatsoever.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask, I wanted to elaborate a bit on the question that you are intergovernmental. Because we have a basic question, we have heard also from the video that the problem is always with the Council. Parliament is in favor, members are in favor, the community is in favor, but then the Council decides other way. So the Council actually are the member states. So is it the same difficult to have this intergovernmental collection from the European countries?
No, it's not so difficult. First of all, because we have 24 European members are CERN members as well. So it's good. There are other member states or associate member states. But of course, we have also an enlarged European partners, UK, Norwegian, Switzerland, among others, Israel as well. And we don't have, for example, US. US are just, I would say, partners, and they are not members. So they don't pay anything for the time being, just voluntary basis, which is quite strange.
They
in
cannot
terms of-
withdraw it. Yeah, so
Yes,
they can,
yes, by definition, and we don't know how it would work. But so I would say, for the time being, we are trying to convince our member states. But it's true that they are short of money, definitely. And we do believe that there is some arguments that I try to mention here that justify the EU stepping in for complementing and to make this realized. Otherwise, I'm afraid that, okay, waiting for the German election very soon, but the situation in many countries in general, it's not easy for the country to complement and to add up, to make an add-on of 2 to 3 billion.
Thank you. Last question goes to Daniel from me. Daniel, you have seen the last 40 years working in CEPS. CEPS is the biggest think tank helping the budgetary procedure in Europe. Yeah, not for research, but just for the entire budget. How do you see the progress, beside that everything was there already 40 years ago? It was some improvement, it's linear, nothing changed. How, are you optimist or pessimist with the current budget?
On the budget process, I think very little improvement. And I think it's actually a mistake to say first we collect the money and then we decide, because then it becomes a zero-sum game. And many member states would say, if it is used for these purposes, we can have a bigger budget. So I think that is already a starting mistake. In terms of European industry, I think, or European economy in the world in terms of high tech, I think we have, with great efforts, basically more or less kept our situation, our relative position. The world has become bigger, so necessarily our share of the global economy, of global R&D goes down. But we have barely kept it, and I think the framework programs have been an important part in allowing us just to keep up with the Jones, so to speak, at least in some areas. But on the budgetary process, I think it's very important that this should be changed. And I would appeal much less to the European feeling in member states, because after all, we say, this is the envelope, right? How much is for me, right? And I think what many member states don't see is that they actually get, let's say, a more than juste retour from spending on R&D. If you look at the numbers, there are of course some member states, the new member states who get very little, but some get a lot. And especially the member states called frugals are usually ones who get the most out of R&D spending, not directly, because fortunately this is competitive, but I think this is an education to be done with the finance ministries in these countries to tell them, look guys, if you cut the framework program, you're actually cutting money for yourself. So I would say two things: change the way the budget is done, or the MFF, and then secondly, educate the national finance ministries, because one of the strengths of CERN is that there you don't have finance minister people or economics ministers even saying, how much do I get out in terms of contracts?
They do, but...
Yeah, but fewer,
Yes.
right? The people who are really determined are scientists who care about this stuff. So I think that's on these two fronts, I think we can make much more progress.
So with this, we are getting to the end. I'd like to say that the difference between the intergovernmental finance of CERN and the European Union. That in terms of CERN, it's inserted to each member state budget, each country national budget, so it has a parliamentary scrutiny in the country, while the EU budget is really up to the finance ministers to discuss, without the parliamentary scrutiny at the home country. We are missing this support from the national parliaments for the European budget at this stage, so there is a difference. I'd like to leave you with the three important messages. 20 billion available in the EIB. Use the opportunity to contact Felicitas and find out that how you or your friends or your institutions can better benefit from the EIB, who is, by the way, has a new president, Nadia Calvino, who used to be the Director General for DG Budge, and he made the previous budget. So we have now the very direct knowledge, a very direct knowledge in the EIB at the very top level too. So it's about complementing and the added budget. I think that use the time that how we can think as Europeans, better use the European but not EU-related institutions for our science and for our research to cooperate better. as you said, Raphaël, it's not about the money only, it's about the collaboration. Yeah? So talk to Raphaël, and I think that there are many things to discover. And finally, I think that, as Daniel, what are the special sectors he wished to get more finance from the finance, beside the biotech, you mentioned the biotech, and where he would cut. Yeah, because it's easy to agree what we increase. It's much more difficult to agree what we cut. So thanks very much for being with us. And I am very sorry that we could not use the time for a Q&A session with you because the video was a bit longer than we accepted. But I hope that you generated some knowledge which you can use. Thank you so much.
Thank you.